and short presentation. I think what I would like is to give everyone the opportunity to ask questions. If we can probably take the questions at the end of the presentation, we'd be very happy to answer them for you. Next slide, please. So the presentations between myself, there was a Mexican student who I had hoped to be with me, but unfortunately can't, called Maria Hernandez, who is a PhD student in biomedical science, and she is very happy to have contact with any students that want specific who have specific questions about Southampton, as what it's like to be a student in Southampton. Cecilia works in our international office. She is Mexican. She is based in Mexico, but frequently visits Southampton. And we work together helping students in Latin America, particularly Mexico and Colombia, to find PhD supervisors and do PhDs in Southampton. I think at the end, the opportunity to ask questions is in the chat box, and would be pleased to answer any questions that you have. Next slide, please. Southampton. Southampton is in the south of the UK. We're actually very close to London. We're about 100 kilometres from London. You can see on the map where London is, and by train it takes about 1 hour from the centre of Southampton to the centre of London. In Southampton we have an international airport that connects to many European cities and other UK cities, and the flights from Mexico go direct to London, and you can be in Southampton in about 1.5 hours after you arrive. To give you an idea of the size of Southampton, compared to Mexico City or most Mexican cities, we are very small. Our population is about 250,000, about 250,000 people. And that means it's a very nice size for students to live in. So you get to know the whole of the city very easily. We're a vibrant and multicultural city, and it's certainly worth knowing that Cecilia, who I work with, is an alumni of Southampton, and she did a master's with us, an MSc with us, I think in either linguistics or modern languages. It's one of the two. But so if there are questions about what it's like to live in Southampton, Cecilia is a very good person to ask. Next slide, please. Next slide, if that's possible. That's a map of the city. Oh, can we go back to the map, please? Okay, so at the moment, the slide I'm looking at, it gives you an idea of the different campuses that we have in Southampton. There's a main university campus. There we are. On the right-hand side, the main university campus, where most faculties are based. My own faculty is based at the medical school, at the hospital, you can see on the left-hand side. And we also have the National Oceanographic Centre that is at the bottom, where we have marine science, some of our maritime departments, and our oceanographic centre. So we have more than one campus in the city. And to give you an idea of the size of the city, if you wanted to walk from Highfield to the National Oceanographic Centre, it would take you about 45 minutes walking. There's a university bus service that connects all our campuses and all our accommodation or halls of residence where the students live. So it's very easy to get around the centre of Southampton, either by walking, cycling, or by bus. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of some of our other campuses. On the picture at the top of the right is one of the buildings at our main university campus. We also have a campus in a city very close to us called Winchester. It's about 15 kilometres away, and that is where our School of Art is. And we also have a campus in Malaysia. We have an engineering campus in Malaysia. That's just to be complete. Next slide, please. Those are just pretty pictures of our different campuses. Next slide, please. We are a university that has about 25,000 students, and about 1/3 of them, about 30% of them, are not from the UK. So about 7,000 come from countries outside Europe, but it's in the main campus. It has a very cosmopolitan feel. We have a significant number of postgraduate students, both masters and PhD students, and about 1/3 of our staff are international. So certainly in the university has a very international feel to it. In the UK, there's a group of universities called the Russell Group, and it's the UK equivalent of the Ivy League that you have in the States. And so in the UK, it's a group of about 20 universities that are distinct because they have a lot of research. In addition to teaching students, they have a lot of research in their university. And this is particularly important for anybody wanting to do a PhD, which is a research degree. And it's a kind of the research culture of the university that PhD students need to focus on. Where we stand in the world, in the QS ranking, we're in the top 100, and currently we're ranked 97th. Next slide, please. So, although I'm a professor in the medical school and my interest is in genetics, I'm here presenting the whole of the university. So what I'm hoping that that you're interested in doing a PhD, and I don't know what each of you wants to study, which field is, what field you want to study, but we can help you no matter what your field of interest is. And the area of research that the university covers many, many things: medicine and health, engineering, art and law, physical sciences, humanities and social sciences, natural environmental sciences, and marine and maritime. It's probably quicker to tell you what we don't do. So we don't do dentistry, and we don't do agriculture or architecture. But apart from those, we do most subjects. So certainly Cecilia and Fabiola and her colleagues in Innova know very accurately what research areas that the university has expertise in, and we can help find supervisors in the field that you're interested in. Next slide, please. And those are some of the, that's detail of some of the subjects that we cover. And I think Fabiola told me that this is being recorded, this presentation is being recorded, so you'll have an opportunity to look through these slides and that list after this talk. Next slide, please. To give you an idea of the specialist centres and research centres that we have, these are just 4 of them. These are just 4. We have many more, but I would say these are some of our highlights. We have an Institute for Sound and Vibration Studies, and they are world leading in sound engineering and acoustics. I mentioned before that we have a National Oceanographic Centre in Southampton, and in that picture you can see one of the ships that we have that go down to the South Atlantic, for instance, and map the oceans. So we have 2 ships that do this. We have the Optoelectronics Research Centre, and we're very proud that we made the discovery probably about 50 years ago now, but Southampton University discovered optic fibre, or invented optic fibres. We're also the National Centre for Advanced Tribology, and that's the science of surfaces, whether you're an engineer, a biomedical scientist, or physical scientist. The National Centre for Advanced Tribology is based in Southampton, and that's certainly something anyone who's interested in that area must look at. Next slide, please. My own specialty lies within biomedical research, and certainly if anyone there is interested in biomedical research, those are some of the areas that we have expertise in. And I would invite you to discuss specific areas either at the end of this talk, or both Cecilia and myself will be coming to cities in Mexico in the very near future, and I will give you details of those visits at the end of the talk. Next slide, please. So, when you are deciding to do a PhD, the application or your decisions are very different from how you chose your undergraduate program and your master's programs. Okay, and when I did my PhD, I realized the most important thing to decide is who the supervisor is, and making sure you select the right supervisor is absolutely critical. The supervisor will be working in a university they have to be good and have to be delivering excellent research, and you want to work in their group. But the most important thing you need to decide on is the supervisor. And I can't emphasize this enough. And certainly the way that Cecilia and I work with students in Latin American countries and also with Innova is trying to make sure that we help you find the best supervisor for you. And we will be honest with you, and if what you want to do doesn't match our experts or our expertise, we don't want you to come to Southampton. We only want you to come to Southampton if we can find you the supervisor that matches you perfectly. And this is how it's very different from applying to universities to do undergraduate degrees and doing master's degrees. And Cecilia and I work closely in this regard. So when you're looking at a university, when you're looking at Southampton or any university, you need to look at the website. You need to look at the area of research that you want to focus on and try and identify the researchers who will be your supervisor in your field. And it's very difficult to find that in any book or prospectus. It requires you to look at the website and identify individuals. We can help you with that, but at the end of the day, it requires you to look at a researcher's website. You look at their publications, you look at how they describe their research, and then you ask yourself the question, is the research they're doing in the area, does it match what you want to do? And if it does match, we can help you find those supervisors. And when you're deciding what to do, the key question that you have to ask yourself is, what do you want to be doing after your PhD? Many people think about the PhD relating to the subjects that they've done before, either with research projects they did as an undergraduate or a master's student. But what you need to do is think about what you want to do with your PhD, because that determines the rest of your career. And having decided what you want to do, find a university, find a researcher that does that, that matches your ambitions. And I would invite you to contact myself and Cecilia to try and match your interest with our supervisors. So can I have the next slide, please? So having identified a supervisor, there are two approaches to finding out whether they will accept you as a PhD student. And Cecilia and myself have knowledge of the best way to approach individual supervisors. And some supervisors like you to apply direct to the university and submit your application, and Innova can help you with that application, as can Cecilia. But quite often, supervisors quite like you to contact them directly. And we can help you with that introduction. And when you contact a supervisor, most students would do that by an email. And in that email, you need to give a brief outline of what you would like to do. You should expect to have a CV prepared in English to include, to attach to that email. And it's also useful in the email just to indicate that there may be a funding opportunity for you. Many Latin American countries have scholarships that will enable students to complete a PhD. And certainly in Southampton, we have many, many Mexican students receiving CONICET scholarships to enable them to come to Southampton. If there are students listening to this from countries other than Mexico, I believe some students may be coming from Colombia or Bolivia, we have arrangements with other Latin American governments to offer an advantage of applying to Southampton with a government scholarship, either, for instance, Colciencias from Colombia or CONICET from Mexico. So indicate in the email that there are funding opportunities, because that makes a difference to the supervisor. If a supervisor is interested in knowing more about you, it's likely that they will invite you to have a Skype conversation, a conversation with them. In that conversation, what the supervisor wants to find out is what research experience you have. What have you done before, either as an undergraduate project or a master's project, because how you describe your experience, what you've done, what results you've got, that's a very good predictor as to what you would be like as a PhD student. So they often ask you questions about what you did, why you did it, and what you found. They are interested to know what you did, but they're trying to find out whether you'd be what you'd be like as a PhD student. So before the Skype call, just think about how you'd present your previous research. It's possible that they would ask you what sort of things you want to do in your PhD, the area that you want to work in, possibly the proposal, but trying to get from you what is it that you would like to investigate. And it's also worthwhile doing some homework on the supervisor. Find out what they've published before, perhaps read some of their papers, so that you can explore whether what they've done could match your interests. So it's very likely that if you're applying, the supervisor would want some contact with you, both by email and a Skype call. And from my own experience, when I am selecting PhD students for students who want to work in my group, I'm particularly interested to know about their previous projects, their masters and their undergraduates, undergraduate projects, the way they describe their research. And it's very useful for the supervisor to have that discussion. So that's how to prepare, not so much the precise application, but more anticipate what the supervisor wants to find out from you and how they will do it. I'm very happy to take questions about that preparation at the end of the talk. Next slide, please. So to give you an idea of the opportunities that particularly Latin American students have, Mexican, Colombian, I'm not sure if there are any Ecuadorian, Chilean or Peruvian students listening to this, but certainly we have in Southampton close relationships with CONACYT in Mexico and also Ciencias in Colombia. And that we realize that to do a PhD in the UK is expensive, both from the fees for the PhDs in Southampton. It does depend on the type of PhD that you want to do. And for science degrees, engineering, biomedical science, the cost is about £23,000 per year. For PhDs in social sciences, political science, or those disciplines, those fields where you don't use laboratories, the fees are less than that. I would need to check the precise amount, but it's about 17, 18, 19,000 per year. The cost of living in the UK, it's fair to say that nowhere in the UK is cheap, but Southampton is one of the more affordable cities to live in. And our estimate is that you need to live, the cost of living for 1 year is about 10 or 11,000 pounds. And that number I get from Latin American students I know, asking them how much it costs for you to live in 1 year in the UK. And they say between 10 and 11,000 pounds. And that's for accommodation, food, and living expenses. On this slide, I give you a website that gives you information about Mexico, the opportunities for Mexican students applying for funding in Southampton. And of note, for any student from Mexico who obtains the CONACYT PhD scholarship, we have an agreement with the Mexican government that we will reduce the fees by 25% for a Mexican student having a CONACYT PhD scholarship. We have about 120 Mexican students in Southampton, PhD, masters and undergraduate. And we're often the British university that has the most Mexican students studying with us. In case there's anyone, any student from Colombia, I just point out that we also have a similar signed agreement with Ciencias, where we offer a 20% PhD fee reduction for students with a Ciencias PhD scholarship. and we have about 30 or 40 Colombian students at any one time in Southampton. So there's a significant student population from Latin America that I know the students enjoy. Next slide, please. Something I'm really excited about is this new opportunity that has just started in Southampton. So there is a new award called the Southampton University Presidential Scholarship. And this is a scholarship that's open to both UK nationals and international students. And this is a full scholarship. So this will pay all the fees and all the money to live. And each year we will be offering up to 10 full scholarships, full fees, and an award of stipend, that's the money to live on, of £15,000 per year. We have 2 calls per year, and for 2020, one call is just closed in January, but there will be another one in July. That applications are made by the supervisor of a student. So the student needs to have applied to the university. They need to have accepted the offer and have an unconditional offer from the university. In that situation, if the supervisor would be in a position to nominate that student for a presidential scholarship. And these will be very, very competitive, but we realize it's an excellent opportunity for students. That's the web address at the bottom of the page for more details. But it requires the student to have applied, the supervisor to have accepted, and an unconditional offer to be made to the student, but the application is by the supervisor. And I certainly expect students from Latin America, particularly Mexico, to be applying for this because it's an excellent opportunity. Next slide, please. So this is coming to the end of the talk. Those are contact details. Cecilia, who works with Southampton University, as I say, is based in Mexico. Those are my contact details. Please feel free to contact either myself or Cecilia, and also Debbie, who works for Innova, who is one of our representatives in Mexico and other Latin American countries to help students apply. Can I have the next slide, please? This gives you the dates of our next visits to Mexico. So Cecilia is visiting Mexico City in the 5th to 9th of February, the 15th to 16th, and the 29th of February, the 1st of March at those fairs, those hotels. Details of Guadalajara, Puebla, and Monterrey. I'm excited to have the opportunity of joining Cecilia in Mexico on the 15th and 16th of February, where I'll be with her at the Sheraton Hotel. But if any of you want to meet Cecilia, those are her dates and where she'll be, and I'll be very welcome. I'd be very pleased to meet any of you in Mexico City on the 15th or 16th of February at the Sheraton. I've been before, and I have to say I've enjoyed it every time I've been. And I think that's my last slide. Can I just check? Yes. We're very happy to take questions.
Great, thank you.
Cecilia is Mexican. Just to say, I can't speak Spanish.
Great.
Hi, does anybody have any questions?
There are questions, so I'm going to start reading them, and if you can actually reply by the audio, and everybody who has questions, please put them on the chat, and we're going to read them out loud for you, okay? So the first one is,
perfect.
How long will it take the supervisor to reply to our email?
Difficult question. Everybody is different. I would expect an interested supervisor to be replying within a week. This, I would emphasize, this is something that Cecilia and I can help you with, and that good supervisors receive many emails, and something that we do is introduce a student to the supervisor, so that I have a network of colleagues around the university that if I think there's a particularly good student, I will send that email to the supervisor and say, I think you should speak to this student because I think they're good. So it's an important question, and I realize it can be frustrating that sometimes busy supervisors seem to take a long time to answer. We can help you in that. There's a question you should ask yourself, is that if a supervisor takes a long time to answer my email when I email them, will this mean that they'll take a long time to see me if I'm their actual PhD student? So if a supervisor takes a long time to answer, you do need to be quite clever and decide whether they'll make a good supervisor for you, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Very related to that, somebody's asking, can we CC you, Dr. David Wilson, when we contact the supervisor?
No, I think they should. Sorry.
Sorry, can you repeat the question for me, please?
Of course, they're asking if they can.
I think they're asking
to copy you in the email when they contact the supervisor.
I think they should. Sorry. I think they should copy me, or instead of they reaching the supervisor directly, if they can contact me first, and then I can do the link, because most supervisors won't reply to a direct applicant or just an email from, just an applicant on its own. Whereas if I contact them on behalf of the international office, it might be that they reply faster.
I would agree with that.
Thank you. There's another question that is linked to another one, so I'm going to ask them together. Is it common to be rejected, and what are the most common reasons for rejection?
Sometimes the supervisor does not have space, and that they have they have enough PhD students and they won't be able to take more until PhD students are completed. Something I mentioned about contacting a supervisor is the funding opportunity. That supervisors have many students apply to them, but not many are able to apply for a government scholarship. And it's important to emphasize to a supervisor that you would be in a position to apply for a CONACYT scholarship, because if you require the supervisor to find you the money for you to come, that is unlikely. Okay. And that if you have the opportunity of having a government scholarship, that makes a big difference to the supervisor. If you have an interview and they are making an assessment of how good you are, they have an expectation of the level if you like, the academic standard of the students that they expect in their group. So I can't speak for other supervisors, but they do ask themselves the question: does the student have the right experience, and do I think they're good enough?
Okay, thank you. We are also having questions from Bolivian students. They want to know a little bit more if you have an agreement with anything from their government, and what would be the entry requirements for Bolivian students in particular.
Cecilia, are you able to answer the question about the agreement with the Bolivian government? Because I have to confess, I'm not familiar.
Sorry. Since we don't get many students from Bolivia, I understand there's no agreement with the government, but I'm happy to take a look into this and see what their option is. The entry requirements would still be the same. University diploma, master's, or a research proposal. But if you send me an email, I'm happy to look into this and help you individually in each case. Yeah, I believe this is the best answer I can give you.
What I would say is, I think about 2 years ago, I visited Bolivia with Innova. So I know Innova had a trip out to Bolivia, and I went representing the University of Southampton. I visited La Paz, and there was an event at the British Embassy there, or the British High Commission there, that I attended, and I was very impressed with the students I met there. What I would be interested to know is that the Bolivian student asking this question, did I meet you in La Paz or not?
It seems you didn't. And also, just one thing for Bolivian students to know is that Innova has a representative in Bolivia who can actually help you with this. Her name is Elizabeth Coloma, and I will actually send you over the details further because she's very informed of the different options of scholarships and government fundings in Bolivia particularly. There is another question. Do you have a template for research proposals, a specific one for Southampton?
The application is online, and there's an invitation to write a research proposal, and the supervisors have different attitudes to research proposals. Some like to see the formulation of your ideas and how you would investigate it as a PhD student. That contrasts with other supervisors where actually what they want is a conversation with the student. So between them, they can come up with the idea for the PhD project. And that tends to be my approach, that I don't expect a student to come up with an idea of what they can do in my group. Okay, what I much prefer is having a conversation with that student. They have to convince me they're good, but I would prefer to share with them the work that I'm doing in my group and come with an idea between us. Okay, so some supervisors place less importance on the project proposal. Okay, but supervisors are different, and some require you to come up with the idea. And what I don't think there's a template for a project proposal, but what I would like to see would be a clear definition of what the question is, why that question is important, and why, if you did answer the question, how that would help people, and the significance of that work, and how you would go about answering that question, whether it's in a laboratory or whether it's a social science or a historical PhD, how you go about answering that question. And it's more important to be concise and define clearly, express clearly what you want to do, rather than write lots and lots and lots of information. I'm more impressed with a student that presents their ideas concisely in a well-organized fashion, rather than a student thinking they have to write lots. Does that help?
Yes.
If I could add.
Yes, go ahead, Cecilia.
As David mentioned, some supervisors prefer a certain way. I think in some faculties, professors would want to speak to the applicant first and then come together with a research proposal, like write it together. While there are some other faculties, such as modern languages, that they would expect you to write the research proposal yourself and develop your own idea. Sometimes there are already research projects going on that you could adapt to if you wanted to join that specific research group. So in that case, that would be a situation where you can write the research proposal jointly with the supervisor. Whereas, again, there are some faculties that prefer certain length of the research proposal, and some of them would want you to write 2,500 words. Some other ones would prefer you to write 1,500 words. So it would depend on each situation and each person, because it would depend again on the faculty and the supervisor. But if you have any questions, you can send me an email. I'm happy to help you with that as well.
I see a question from Jorge saying, if I talk with a possible supervisor but haven't heard from them again since December, is that a bad sign? No, I don't think that's a bad sign. It might just mean the supervisor's busy. If you have spoken to them and expressed an interest, my suggestion would be to just write a polite email asking them if there are any decisions made, or alternatively, contact Cecilia and she may be able to help you with that question. If you spoke with him in December and now is at the end of January or beginning of February, I wouldn't necessarily feel that's a bad sign. It might just mean they're busy.
I agree. And if you have any, if you would like me to chase any supervisors and kind of see what the situation is with the process, I'm happy to help with that as well.
Could I ask, for that specific question, what was the field of your PhD? Was it in engineering, biology, biomedical science, health sciences? It'd be useful to know which faculty it was. Physics. Okay. What my recommendation is, contact Cecilia with the details of the supervisor and see whether we can help you with that.
Yes, please.
Great. There are more questions coming in through the WhatsApp, and there says, are 3 years enough time to finish a PhD? CONACYT is only funding 3 years.
Yes, most PhDs, we would expect the experimental work to be completed in 3 years. So I don't know whether the person asking the question is a scientist or what, but most PhDs will finish their laboratory work at 3 years. And then following that, the student has up to 12 months to complete the written thesis and have a viva. And the fees, the expensive fees, occur when you're doing the experiments. And that when you've finished all your experiments and you then start writing your thesis, the fees become much, much smaller. You still have the problem of living in the UK, but most students will finish all their experiments at 3 years.
Okay, thank you. There is another question. Go ahead, Cecilia, if you want to add something.
Sorry. Since CONACYT launched the call last week, on the website still it's still showing 4 years, but they had said they were only going to fund 3 years. I believe after those 3 years, if you have done all your experiments and all that data collection and everything you had to do, and then you only need to start writing your dissertation, I believe you can switch to nominal fees, as David mentioned. And with their new scheme for international students that they can stay working in the UK for 2 years after they graduate, well, that would be an option. I know it's not ideal, but I think we would need to wait until CONACYT confirms that it would only be 3 years, because on the website it says 4. So just something to consider.
Thank you. And also, if I may add that the CONACYT call for this year is now open. So if you actually go into the CONACYT calls, you can see that you can actually check everything out. There is a question of, is it advisable to work while in the PhD? Because as we all know, well, this is added by me, but as we all know, students can work half-time during their studies and full-time while on holidays. But is it actually advisable?
Okay, I'll answer that. My advice is a student should not take work outside their PhD. And the PhD is a full-time research position, and the supervisors will be expecting you to spend all your time working on the PhD. And if you are distracted from that, it risks your PhD. So I know your visa allows you to work, but my strong advice, and I say this as a supervisor, my strong advice is don't plan to work outside your PhD.
Thank you. And there's another one. It's regarding the presidential scholarship. Can we tell our supervisor to help us apply to the presidential scholarship?
The application is made by the supervisor. The student does nothing. The student applies for a PhD place, and then the supervisor has to decide whether they propose that student for the presidential scholarship. They will be very competitive, so the supervisors will be choosing the best students, but the student doesn't apply for the presidential scholarship, it is the supervisor.
Okay, thank you.
The student has to apply first for the PhD, the supervisor has to accept them, and an offer is then made to the student for a PhD place. After that, the supervisor has to apply to the university for the presidential scholarship.
Great, thank you for that. I don't know if there are any more questions. You can send them through the chat to our WhatsApps. We'll give you another minute if there are any other questions. It seems not, but I don't know if it's possible to know, because the students will be spending so much time over there. If it's actually, if you can actually talk a little bit about living in Southampton, maybe Cecilia, so that they can actually have a bit more of an idea.
Cecilia, are you in a better position to answer that question than me?
Sorry, could you repeat that, Fabiola?
Because the students will be spending so much time over there. They will be there for 3 years. What is it like for us, like Latin Americans, to actually live over there? That is a question for me, but a lot of the students actually ask that.
Okay. Well, I would say it's a very international community, and that's something that I really like about studying in Southampton, that a big percentage of international students as a postgraduate level especially are in the same situation as you are. So there's a lot of activities going on at the university, like on a weekly basis for you to engage in social activities. And I think that's something that I really liked as well in my classes. I know that for a PhD it would be different because you're not taking modules or anything, but I would say about four people in my course were British. Of 120, everybody else was from a different country. So that's something that I really liked because everybody had a very different point of view on a lot of topics. So I think I never felt, well, I did feel like sometimes I missed the food, but I think it's something that everybody experiences when living abroad and in the UK. But we do have a Mexican society. We're very active. We have parties such as Dia de Muertos. Right now, actually, they're making tamales for Dia de la Candelaria. Um, uh, Sometimes we'll get together and just cook like Mexican food. So I think it's very important to have this kind of links to your culture, because I know when I got to Southampton, I said I'm not gonna be the Mexican who only hangs out with the Mexican. Um, and while I still had my group of international friends, whenever I fancied chatting, I would just go with them and prepare tacos or this time tamales. We also have lots of cultural activities as well. We made like a Mexican board game fair, and we showed people how to, like, the kind of games we would usually play with, like, I don't know, loteria or trompo, or just showing them about our culture. We had the Mexican Dia de Muertos. We had an altar, and then we had cutting paper, like papel picado workshop. So these kind of things are very interesting because it's an opportunity to show all the international community about your culture. And we do get students from China, Belgium, Spain, other parts from the UK, like attending these workshops. So I think it's a very good opportunity for you to learn about other cultures and to show, the international community about your culture. So yeah.
Cecilia, can I ask you, before you came to Southampton, did you speak to any Mexican students already there to find out what it's like?
I actually met Eric, who's now the president of the Mexican Society, through a Facebook group. And he was actually the one who helped me find an apartment when I got there. So I think it is very helpful to speak to people who are already there, who can give you the advice on how to prepare yourself to get there, in terms of what kind of clothes to bring, what kind of expect weather-wise, the size of the university, or I don't know, any kind of questions you might have about moving to a new country. So I think it is something that's worth considering doing, and especially since I can help you with that as well. If you don't want to speak to me because I work with the university, I'm happy to put you in contact with other Mexicans who are already there. And we have Mexican students in a lot of different faculties, so it might be that I could put you in contact with somebody who already attended, or one of the course that you want to do, or the faculty that you want to do research on, which has happened in the past, and they're usually very helpful and very eager to help in this kind of situation. So if you would like to do this, I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Cecilia. So it seems we don't have any other questions. Remember that you can be in touch with Cecilia. I think it's in the next slide. I'm going to go on with it. Well, I'll actually leave that to Dr. Wilson. Remember, you can be in touch with her We can also help in Innova through your whole process. So we can actually help you also getting in touch with Cecilia, with Dr. David Wilson, in case you need to be in touch with him, with other people. And I don't know, Dr. David, if you want to go on to the next slides.
I missed the final. What was your final point?
Okay, that we actually don't have any other questions, but I don't know if you want me to go on to the next slide, because I see that you have something else in the next ones.
No, those are just reserved slides.
Okay.
I think the presentation is finished. What I would just like to say, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity of presenting this. I will be in Mexico with Cecilia in very soon, and if any of you do come and meet us, please introduce yourselves as having heard this webinar. I'll be very pleased to meet you. And if there's anything we can do to help in your applications, any questions, we'll be pleased to help you. So thank you. So thank you, Fabiola. Thank you, Cecilia, for setting this all up.
Thank you, Professor Wilson, for joining us and taking the time. It's just so everybody knows, it's like 6 p.m. in the UK. And I also wanted to let everybody know that since the first call from Conacyt is open now will be a good time to start working on your application or looking for a potential supervisor, which is the first step. So I'm happy to help with that. Please drop me a line, send me an email, and we can start looking into your options. Thank you, Fabiola and Debbie.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. We are Innova Education. We're Deborah Cedeño and Fabiola Delfin here in Innova. Thank you, Dr. Will. Thank you, Cecilia. And remember that in Innova, we can help you out through your whole process, applying up to the end to seeing the scholarship options, and with your visa process. We have 100% visa approval in Innova, and our services are for free. We are recording this session, so if you want to see it again, we will probably have it available in the next days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hasta pronto.